Sutharshan Sukumaran is the co-editor of Tamil Guardian, a daily online news outlet focusing on Sri Lanka, the Tamil diaspora and international human rights affairs. He joins us from London. Sutharshan, thanks so much for joining us here at TRT World. Now, Rajapaksa just tweeted following the announcement. He says this is a new journey for Sri Lanka and that all Sri Lankans are part of this journey. He's promising unity. What are his chances to actually unite this deeply, deeply divided country?
Well, the first thing to see is actually when you look at there was an English statement, a full press release that came out from his party. And they mentioned two things that were quite maybe alarming. So one thing was they said they'd make sure there's no kind of ethnic back deals in Parliament. And they also mentioned that they would look to revisit the 19th Amendment of the Constitution. Now, these two things kind of belie what he said about bringing unity, because a long-standing issue in Sri Lanka has been securing a political solution between the north and east of the island and the majority community. So he's already hinted that he wouldn't allow for any deals or power-sharing deals. And secondly, he's hinted at the 19th Amendment, which was an amendment brought in to bring in checks and balances to the presidency of the country, which previously was used for things like corruption and extrajudicial killing and just a general breakdown of rule of law. So in terms of bringing the country together, there's a lot that needs to happen going forward, especially when you look at the voting pattern. So the north and east, well, first of all, in the elections, you had an 80% turnout, which is quite a high turnout, a high democratic election turnout. And the north and east, they didn't vote for Gotabaya Rajapaksa as the president. And overwhelmingly in the south, he's been voted in. And actually, it's the biggest majority this kind of ultra-nationalist singular Buddhist party has had in decades. And the whole election campaign was run on not devolving powers to the north and east and securitizing the state. So when you run an election campaign on that, whilst also denying things like war crimes allegations and allegations of crimes against humanity and extrajudicial killings and abductions of journalists, it's really hard to see how they can move forward whilst denying all those tangible and legitimate accusations of crimes, which have also been found in UN reports.
Mm-hmm. Sutharshan, many analysts said that these presidential elections deeply divided people of Sri Lanka and that both Rajapaksa and Premadasa campaigned on quite divisive rhetoric. Would you agree with that?
Yes, so what we saw in the come-up to the elections is the Tamil North and East were actually, for a while, they were considering whether or not they didn't know which candidate to endorse, because actually the narrative of the two dominant parties, which was Rajapaksa and Premadasa, didn't speak on the key issues for the Tamil and Muslim communities, which were issues of things like demilitarization, accountability for war crimes, and a political settlement. So the whole narrative of that whole election was run on a narrative that pandered to kind of this majoritarian nature of the state. And because of that, it's allowed kind of a whole new ethos, or not a new ethos, but a re-emergence of this kind of singular national Buddhism that has kind of plagued the country and always caused ethnic conflict for its kind of 70-year history. And it's a very similar form of nationalism to what we've seen in Myanmar, where we saw the Rohingya community face the brunt of it in terms of the atrocities and the genocide they faced. So the international community needs to be really careful going forward in terms of how they engage with Sri Lanka and how they're going to really ensure and promote that structural barriers are put in place to protect communities like the Tamil and the Muslim community, which have been historically faced the brunt of an oppressive kind of ultra-nationalist singular type of politics.
Mm-hmm. For most of the people of Sri Lanka, regarding of which community they belong, security seemed to be the main issue in these elections following that Easter Sunday bombing in April. Can Rajapaksa make the country safer, in your opinion?
This is where we can look at who actually Rajapaksa is. So Gotabaya Rajapaksa, as he said before, he was the former defense secretary from 2005 to 2010. And the scenario he came into power was actually very similar to now. They'd had about 4 or 5 years of kind of peace talks between the north and east and the island, where there was a resurgence of civil society. So civil society started to mobilize again. A lot of journalists were getting kind of more active again. And then suddenly Gotabaya swept into power in 2005. And what we saw immediately after was actually they call it security, but we saw an attack on civil society. So over 40 journalists were killed in the space of 5 years, from 2005 to 2010. The majority of them were Tamil. A lot of civil society leaders were targeted by military and paramilitary and killed and abducted. Ironically, just one day before the elections, you had mothers of the disappeared, families and mothers of the disappeared, who were protesting for the 1,000th continuous day, asking about the whereabouts of their children that were abducted. Now, Sri Lanka has a case of about 146,000 people that have been missing, that are largely thought to have been abducted by state security apparatus. And Gotabaya was actually a main influencer of the state security apparatus. And this isn't just hearsay. There are UN reports which suggest Gotabaya ordered abduction of journalists, extrajudicial killings. Even in this election campaign, actually, a few days before the presidential election, some people that used to drive the white van abduction vans in Sri Lanka admitted to abducting civil society and Tamil journalists and killing them and literally feeding them to alligators. And this all happened under Gotabaya Rajapaksa's regime. So he may talk about security, but there's a wealth of evidence of what he's really capable of. And we're seeing now in Sri Lanka, all of the civil society are in fear. They're locking down their Twitter accounts. People that can get out of the country are getting out of the country. And especially in the north and east, in the Tamil north and east, there's massive fear right now.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Sutharshan Sukumaran, thanks so much for that live for us from London. Thanks for that insight for us, Sutharshan.